Got a wonderful history. The founder was a woman named Mary Middleton. She and her husband Sam, this was their farm. And so they were a Baltimore couple, and they would come out here on weekends. And of course, it used to take a full day to get out here back in the day. You'd take the Baltimore to Love Point ferry. And then tragedy struck them. Their daughter Emily was stricken with polio. And they decided that there were no schools in Baltimore that were equipped. There was no American for Disabilities Act back in 1912. So they came out in 1911. They started the school, and it was basically a farm school. And so the school for about 20 or 30 years was a school for kids between 8 and 18. They all lived in this house, which is this used to be one of Aunt Mary's rooms that we're sitting in. Her bedroom is directly above me. And then in the 40s, Sam died, and there are very different stories about why the school then transitioned to be an all-girls boarding school. But from the mid-40s until 1995, we were one of the sort of renowned girls' boarding schools on the East Coast. And the women who came here largely because of the setting. Every girl had a horse. Horseback riding was the PE program. That was there was no gym. You just rode in the afternoon. You took care of your horse. And then in 95, kind of in the mid 90s, two things happened. Two things conspired to change Gunston pretty dramatically. One was boarding began to decline somewhat in the United States, and single-sex boarding, all girls boarding, also began to see a decline. That, coupled with the changing demographics of this area, obviously with the Bay Bridge opening, we then had a population, and we draw from as far east as Dover, as far south as Easton, as far north as Middletown, Delaware, as far west as Annapolis. There was enough population to support a day school, and so we went from basically a 58 to 60 student all-girls school to a school that's now about 140 students co-ed. One of the things that's still in our school's DNA is this boarding school feel. We still feel like a boarding school even though we're a day school. And so we take a lot of pride in our size, and our size is what makes us special. It's the thing that creates the nurturing relationships between faculty and students, the strong sense of community among the parents, and the really strong relationship that developed between the students. I came from a high school that was 240. Before here I was working at a school in New Jersey, and that was considered small. So we would have to get a lot bigger to still not feel small. I think our students, I find, are remarkably well-rounded and prepared for college, and I think that's a result of the size of the environment. There's a lot of rigor here. It's an academically rigorous program, but we haven't caught the virus of where there's this college pressure. I mean, our students get into wonderful schools, but at our school, it's not all about college. It's a lot more about learning, and it comes from a pretty rigorous environment. Our students write this very long junior symposium research paper, a long senior thesis type of paper. The second thing is there's a lot of nurture that goes on here, and I think students display a remarkable degree of care for one another and care for the faculty, and I find that all of our graduates kind of take that with them as well, that sense of kindness. And it's sort of old-fashioned. It's everybody knows everyone here. And I think the last degree is, there's a lot of personalization at Gunston. And I think one of my favorite books is a book by Helen Vendler, who is she's a Harvard English professor, and she wrote a book about these 4 poets. And she studied their poetry up to the point where she believed that they wrote their first masterpiece. And the book is called, I think it's called The Voice of the Poet, and it's the idea that every poet has their own voice. And I think for us, when our students leave us, we're hoping that they found their voice, and that when they go to college, they're not just prepared as students, but they're prepared in the sense that they know themselves, and that they can advocate for themselves. And I think there's a lot of discussion about the way the head role has changed. I mean, in John McPhee's book, Frank Boyden was kind of the Tweedy headmaster who pretty much did everything, and I think the role has become more complex in those days with the financial constraints, and with I think both private school heads and university presidents to say that the pressure for fundraising has risen quite a bit. But ultimately for me, it's about being with students, seeing them succeed. I still teach a class here. I teach a literature of modern Asia class, and we meet as a faculty once a week. And it's wonderful at Gunston. We're still small enough that we can meet around a single table. So we have. We don't have a very corporate structure here in terms of our level of collegiality. There aren't many middle managers here at Gunston because we're just so small. And I think that does preserve a kind of humanity in the interaction that you have with students and with faculty. But I think one of the things that I've been charged with a little bit as head here is to be out in the community a little bit more, to be maybe even off campus, maybe more than some of my predecessors. So that's a balance, trying to make sure that you're extending Gunston's presence in the community while also making sure that you're connected to the kids, because ultimately that's where I derive the most satisfaction, watching them grow, watching them thrive. I think affordability is the biggest question. I think obviously a Gunston education is an investment, and I think our parents understand that it's an investment. And it's an investment of their resources and their dollars. We obviously have families of very different means at Gunston. There's a great story about Aunt Mary, as we call her, our founder, going to Baltimore and dragging a girl out from her parents and bringing her out here, and the parents paid the bill 5 years later. It doesn't quite work that way this day and age, but our board is very committed to providing enough financial aid so that almost every student who meets our admissions requirements is capable of attending. And as a school, we work very closely and very personally with those families. And I think it's one of the reasons people don't apply, is that they feel that they can't afford it. But I think for those parents who actually go through the process, they realize that independent schools can actually be more affordable than they think they can. And we have all kinds of ways to help parents sort of meet the expectation. Again, our classes are between 8 and 12 students per class, and the public schools are, 25 and 30. I think Maryland spends something like $13,000 per pupil. Our tuition is a little over $20,000. It's very expensive to educate students in such a small environment. But like I said, our board wants to see Gunston kids get a Gunston education. Well, we're in the community, and I think what's interesting about Gunston is I think back when we were a boarding school, we weren't as much a part of the community. I think largely because our students did not come from the community; they came from far away. So we see our role in the community in a number of ways. We're obviously a significant employer in this community. As a school, we were certified as a Maryland Green School, so we see ourselves as a resource in that regard. We also try to host as many programs as we can on campus. We have a program called Think Tank, which is sort of an after-school enrichment program for kids that we have probably 4 students enrolled in. We have a summer program. So our hope is to be a good citizen in this county. It's not just this county. We're really a 5, and sometimes, depending on the year, a 6-county and 2-state school. In fact, last year we were a 7-county, 2-state school. So we draw from a huge area, mostly obviously from Kent, Queen Anne's, and Talbot. And so, I do my best to be in the community, both as a member of the Midshore Community Foundation and as a member of the Rotary. Where I can help to articulate what programs we offer to those groups, and then I'm also much more aware of what's happening in this community, whether it be politically, economically, environmentally. Well, I think I've been really concerned recently just about the economy. We see a lot of our current families are in economic distress. So I think as a citizen, my hope is that this area is going to grow. That's all there is to it. We're a country that's going from 300 million to 400 million, by whatever it is, 2030. And the DC metro area is only going to grow, right? So it's going to grow this way. So I'm hoping that the counties and our counties, make some smart decisions with respect to growth. That we look at, high-paying, sustainable employment. And that we also balance that with making sure that we preserve the natural splendor that brings people to the Eastern Shore generally. But I see the battle going on, and I think my concern in the short term is just our families. It's so much of the Eastern Shore is real estate based. A lot of our economy is related to the real estate market, and that market's taken a big hit, and by consequence, so have many of our families.